Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in this week. Thank you for liking us and subscribing. Very important to subscribe on the YouTube channel. Also listening to us on iTunes and Google Play. We were talking earlier about horse sales. There's no guarantee. The most money you spend will guarantee a winner. Therein the beauty and sometimes the frustration of it all. If you've ever been to a horse sale, it does have that feel like you're at a sporting event, especially when the numbers start going up and you see 2 or 3 people bidding against each other. The man that is the master of setting the stage for this is the senior sales announcer for Fasig Tipton. He'll be there at the Saratoga sale, their big sale coming up on August 5th and 6th, and then their New York bred sale 11th and 12th up at Saratoga. He is my friend Terence Collier. Terence, welcome in.
Well, good morning, Kenny. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. You know, I've enjoyed going to horse sales for many years, and actually one of the things that got me into becoming interested in horse racing was going to horse sales. I remember meeting you years ago, and it just always fascinates me, the excitement when a big sale is going on. Does it still feel that way to you?
Well, the day it doesn't, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give it up because it has been one of the most exciting things that I've been able to do in my career. And without it, it's hard to generate that energy. But frankly, Kenny, I get the same kick out of selling a $5,000 horse for somebody I know well in Timonium as I might do selling a $500,000 yearling or 2-year-old for somebody at Saratoga or at the Gulfstream sale. So it's not the amount that makes the difference. It's getting a job done well that really gives you the satisfaction.
That's a great point, because if I'm that guy and all I'm hoping to get is $5,000 or $6,000 out of this horse, I sure want to get $5,000 or $6,000 out of this horse. Not everyone in the sport of kings is, let's say, has kingly money.
Well, that's very true. But the thing that just amazes me about the resilience of people that involve themselves in the commercial side of this industry is that they buy a mare, they breed the mare, they wait for almost a year and a half before they know what they've got. And then they've got to put it through a sale. You think of the expense that they have generated until that very moment. And then they get it ready for a yearling sale. They involve themselves in a lot of expense and worries, concerns and things. And that yearling walks into a ring and it's got something like a minute and a half to achieve whatever it can achieve for that breeder. We sit here in our black ties sometimes at Saratoga and watch those yearlings come in. You imagine the tension and the heartbreak and all of the emotions that are running through the guy or gal that has bred that yearling. So we like to give them their moment in total focus, and hopefully we'll do a good job for them. But it's a 90-second risk. It's a tough thing to do.
You have eloquently put it all into perspective, what I was trying to say earlier about the excitement of it all. That's just beautifully put, Terence. And that's what you do. That's what you do, because when that horse comes in, you've got a small amount of time, because you're going to turn it over to those guys that are going to start the auctioneering chant and looking out for the spot bidders, and you've got to set the stage, though. You're the man that paints this picture of why should I be interested in this horse.
You've got to find out with every yearling. I think one of the great difficulties at a major sale like Saratoga is that you get a yearling walk through the ring and he sells for a couple of $1 million. And you can almost feel that air going up out through the roof and into the ether. And now you've got the next hit number coming into the ring. And there's a lot of distraction. There are people running around trying to find the buyer, congratulate him. There are people running around trying to find the seller to congratulate him. And the next guy's yearling is there in the ring. And he or she wants you to refocus everything and pull everything back together. And so you've got to look around quickly, see who's there, get their attention, get the mood set again. It's a constantly changing palette, but you've got to do that every single time.
As far as yourself, are there not just one thing, but are there 2 or 3 key things that you feel you've got to announce with every horse that comes in the ring, be it one that's going to sell 7 figures or one that's going to sell for $5,000?
Well, there are some key things that you've got to announce just to complete the legalities and to tell everybody what they're actually looking at. So you've got to go through the consignor and the hip number and the color and the sex and then the sire and the dam. Those are mechanical things that you've got to do. It's impossible for any announcer to go through any sale that they're working in and to see every horse that is walking in that ring. I do that for most of our selected sales, and particularly like Saratoga, so that you've got a better idea of what type of Rolls Royce or what type of Ferrari that you're offering at that particular time. But after a lot of years, you get a very good idea just from the moment that horse walks in, how its presence in that ring is going to affect your ability and the auctioneer's ability to get a good job done. They are all individual personalities, and you've got to be able to find that quickly, because there's always going to be a buyer at a certain level for a horse that has those attractive qualities to them that will draw the buyer's attention. So if you can pick up on that, that's what you've got to draw their attention to. I remember old Ralph Rettler, who was a master auctioneer for Fasig Tipton many years ago. And he kept on telling me when I was much younger and greener behind the ears, and he said to me, you've got to look at the horse as it comes in the ring. Don't get your head stuck in that catalogue and be reading things. Look as though you're involved. Look as though you know what's going on in the ring. And I would do as much of that as I could, but occasionally I get into a string where I was struggling with the pedigrees, and so I keep my head down and keep firing on. And he said to me, he leaned over during the time, put his hand over his mic, and he said, oh, and you better tell him how good looking this one is. And without thinking, I just said, oh, and what a lovely yearling it is. And I look up and there's this great big Roman-headed common colt in the ring that only a mother could love. And the audience is all looking at me saying, what on earth is this man talking about? So I learned very quickly, look at the horse first, check that you've got the right hip number, and always try to find something that's attractive about the horse that you can promote to the audience.
Because when it happens, like you say, you've got a minute and a half or less that a year and a half or so of preparation, sometimes longer, is going to pay off.
Absolutely.
How much, when do you feel, is there a code in there? Because I know sometimes if the bidding is kind of stuck, or is not going as quickly, and the number isn't moving up like people thought or was hoping, that you will interject again. The auctioneer will take just a slight break, and you've got maybe a 10-second window to throw something else at them. How do you get that rhythm going with the auctioneer, and how do you start thinking in your head what I want to say?
Kenny, it's not so much getting the rhythm going, it's not interrupting the rhythm of the auctioneer.
Okay.
If I find that he's getting to where he's got to be quickly, then you don't worry about it. But the auctioneers are so experienced at this game that they will move that process as appropriately as it needs to move towards the reserve price or towards the value of that horse. And the worst thing you can do is to break in out of a sense of desperation halfway through that rhythm, and you can sense the frustration in the audience. You've broken in, you've broken that rhythm, and you don't have the right thing to say at that point. You've got to, in this time where we have to move these horses through the ring fairly rapidly, but B, it would be like a band leader being broken into halfway through a climax in one of his tunes. So you have to resist that temptation. When it is close and you don't feel like it's going to move over, again, it's probably not worth breaking in. But when you get close and you feel that that buyer could be nudged and just needs a little time to regroup and get a little more Dutch courage to make the next bid, that's when the auctioneer and the announcer know that it's time to move in. And, when you work with these guys for a long time, and they are absolute masters of their profession, you develop a knowledge of if they're struggling, if the horse is struggling, if the buyer is struggling, and then and only then do you break in and try to push somebody to the next level just to get the job done.
We're talking with Terence Collier, the senior sales announcer for Fasig Tipton. He's as good as it gets, always smooth, always seems to have the right word at the right time. And if you have a chance to go to the Saratoga sale coming up at Fasig Tipton, or if you have a chance to see a horse auction stay in the back. Don't get in anybody's way. But I think it's a fascinating thing to see. I think if you're a horse player, you enjoy the sport, you would enjoy coming to the auction. I mean, I hope I don't want to flood the crowd there, Terence, where you say, hey, you got to leave. We're shutting the door. But, I think people like it.
Far from it. And I'd just like to add a compliment to my old friend Kenny Rice, too. I think you bring that same degree of professionalism to everything that you do on television, and you add an air of positiveness at any stage of your interview. So congratulations to you, and thank you for sending those people to Saratoga. And let's go up there, as the Eagles sang, and hell freezes over, and kick a little ass.
Well, speaking of, Terence, I want to put you on the spot a little bit here. Can you name this tune? Now, I've heard of this group. I think they were called Vanity Fare, as best I remember. And the song is Hitchin' a Ride, their big hit. And one Terence Collier was singing on this song.
Well, Kenny, you've pointed this out to me many times, and I hope I've corrected you equally.
I know, but I always like to just throw it out there.
Well, it was a wonderful part of my life, and I enjoyed it tremendously. And I did sing that song in a I guess, a demo disc that eventually got recorded by a different group of people. But Hitching a Ride was when I was about 19 years old, newly out of school, in the Navy, and it got released on the West Coast and did a little better than everybody thought it would do. It was actually going to be the B-side, and the A-side was a song called We All Live for the Sun. But it took off, and Hitching a Ride did quite well. In those days, a record would stay in the hit parade for any number of weeks, not these days. But it hung around for a while, and it got known, and now I'm known as one of the golden oldies.
Well, there you see, the young boy from Kent, England, making good as a rock and roller, no matter how briefly, even on a demo, to get it going, to get it to where it was. And during this time, though, you met some interesting cats. I believe weren't you still with the group when they let in for the Animals?
The Animals, the Yardbirds, the Stones. We were all down from the southeast of England, and we were just down the road from where the Rolling Stones all grew up. The Animals were a bit further away from home. They were North England boys, but Eric Burden sensed my awe when I walked onto the stage, and it was before the show started, and he said to us, look, your equipment is probably not going to fill this hall, but you guys can just plug into what we've got. Well, we'd never been given an opportunity like that, and Eric was supping on a Guinness out of a bottle, and he said, here we are, this will get your throat going, right? So on we went and opened for one of the opening groups for the Animals. It was a great thrill.
Oh, I mean, that's like you're talking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame stuff now. Did you ever get to meet Mick and Keith, Bill Wyman, Charlie Watts, any of those guys?
I mean, strangely enough, I met Mick in the airport building at Nassau Airport when they were on the way to a recording studio down there somewhere. I can't say he remembered me, but when I reminded him of what we'd done, I mean, he had a million more important things on his mind at that stage, but he did remember going down to the Gravesend Co-op and playing there, and I guess I prompted him into remembering that we were his opening band.
Yeah, that was such a magical time in all of rock and roll history. I still don't think, you go the 60s especially, and the whole British invasion, and I don't think there's been a more magical time. I guess you could say Chuck Berry and Bill Haley, and obviously leading into Elvis and Carl Perkins and all that, Little Richard, but that carried on and just really made it explode all over the world.
Well, don't forget, Kenny, it was you that fixed us up with the tickets to go to see Bruce Springsteen at the Rupp Arena.
Yes.
And not only did we get tickets, we got into the green room, and the boss couldn't make it there, but Patty came and said hello to us all. So you're responsible for one of the great nights of my life, meeting this Bruce Springsteen and the Backstreet Boys.
Well, listen, that we're rock and rollers. You know that this show's a rock and roll show. We try to make it a little happening because, as we know, Terence, and we love the sport, but it can get a little stale at times. Horse racing. You got to kind of put the volume up to 11 every now and then. Well,
that's going to happen at Saratoga and on August the 5th and 6th for me, and I know it'll happen several times for you during the meet. So very much looking forward to it.
What I remember most about the Springsteen concert was looking down there. You and our good friend Dennis Lynch were sitting up there, and Billy Rappaport, and we've got these good seats, and we're looking down there. And my friend Terence Collier, the old rock and roller that he is, from Vanity Fair days, from leading in for the Animal days, to being a premier sales announcer, is in the mosh pit grooving, and we were just fascinated. You were like the hit. You were like the hit down there. You quickly became the king. They all gathered around you, I noticed.
Well, they couldn't believe this old fella down there was still moving around without a wheelchair. So, but it was a superb evening, and I'll never forget it, Kenny.
So, just being a few feet away from sharing a beer with Eric Burden, being a few feet away from the boss, talking to Mick Jagger, and you also happen to be there for a few big sales. Are there moments that just leap out that you'll never forget at a sale? And it may not have been the biggest money sale, but just something that happened that you say, wow, that was so special. That's indelibly etched.
Well, I think that I could almost remember the whole episode with the Green Monkey, which didn't end happily for either the buyer or the underbidder. I guess it did for the underbidder. He dodged a bullet there. But you can't take away from the fact that the horse went through the ring and brought $16 million and still is the world record for a thoroughbred sold at auction. I think the other one that made me extremely excited was Songbird. She was such an elegant mare, and she, of course, made the highest price of any thoroughbred that particular year. But none of them really have etched a memory that it's the job for a year, and that's the most important thing. And get in the stand and get some enthusiasm going and do your best for everybody that's bringing their horse into the ring.
And again, the excitement of it all. Do you look at the spot bidders and you get all like fired up when that number starts going up?
I do. You don't like to interfere with the bidders or the spotters, excuse me, because, they are taken up there, and they are true professionals because they know when to push a guy. They use psychology to feel how he is about where he is at that moment in time. And it is a pure team effort. And once they get into that sales ring, you've got to have the right auctioneer, the right announcer, and a very supportive group of bid spotters. So you don't like to jump over the top of them just because I see my friend in the back row bidding on a horse. I mean, Wayne Lucas tucks himself way up in a dark little corner and bids very, very discreetly up there. And it's tough for that bid spotter from where he is to see everything that's going on in his section. And Wayne and I have had a relationship that goes back a long way, and he'll look at me and he'll just literally raise a little finger by the side of his glasses. So I have to step in and take his bid, and then the bid spotter will look around at me and say, what on earth are you doing? You're in my territory. Watch out. And I'll just lean over and say, Wayne, back row. And he'll pick him up from there. But there are certain people out there that come up to me during the pre-sale period, and they'll say, look, I'm interested in this hip number. Just keep an eye on me because I want to bid next right with you. And so it's a very, very exciting thing. I love to see the horses. I love to meet the people. And it's been a magical game for me. I've been with Fasig Tipton since 1976, and I've enjoyed every year of it.
And Terence, you made a good point there when I tell people they should come out to see an auction, and especially if you're going to be in the Saratoga area, which is beautiful this time of year. The Fasig Tipton sale coming up the 5th and 6th, and then the New York bred sale 11th and 12th. And it's not a deal where, as you mentioned about Wayne and the subtlety of not just he, but several other of the people bidding because it's serious business for them. I don't remember ever hearing a story, maybe in some smaller deal, I don't know, where some guy just went in and threw his hand up to scratch his nose and suddenly he bought $1 million horse. It doesn't work that way. Like you say, these guys are professional. They really know who the players are. You're not just going to walk in off the street.
Well, I would say that the bid spotters are better off when they don't know who the people are. Because if they, they've got to react to whatever that bidder does. And it's our job within the Fasig Tipton organization, and this is where the credit department comes in as such an important part of what we do. But people are supposed to register for their credit prior to bidding. And if we told our bid spotters only to look at people that they recognize.
Oh, sure.
It will be a very tricky thing. So they have to react to pretty much everything, whether it's an idiot waving his catalog at his friend across the room. I mean, that...
I stand corrected. Don't go in there and start waving because you know what? The first time I went to one, years ago, I actually did that accidentally to get the attention of the photographer I was working with. But nobody looked up there and said, hey, that guy that looks like he's making $15,000 a year, I think he just bid on this $500,000 horse. They didn't say that.
Well,
so I felt I might have escaped.
I remember that incident. And I think you just missed out on buying foolish pleasure. So you could have owned a Kentucky Derby winner.
Well, that would have been the story of my life, just missing out on buying a Kentucky Derby winner.
There we go.
Terence, I can't thank you enough for being on with me, my friend, and best wishes at the Fasig Tipton sale coming up.
Kenny, thank you. And let's just remember for 1 second, if we may, the passing of Mary Lou Whitney, the Queen of Saratoga, who has been such an enormous part of the success of that whole town.
Certainly.
And she is going to be greatly missed by all of her friends, and it'll be a rather sad occasion. But you know what? She is the type of person who will say, look, you're there for the meeting. You're there for the reason, not for the season. So get in there and enjoy it any way you can.
That's certainly well put, Terence, as always. Thank you so much, my friend.
Take good care, Kenny, and thank you.
Thank you. Terence Collier, senior sales announcer for Fasig Tipton. More on the Horse Racing Show coming up when we come back right here. You rock and rollers, stay tuned.